This is all about teach you with respect at your level and encourage you to keep working and find a way to encourage you to do your best. Do your best each time. And your best each time is not going to be your very best every time. Even in your worst time, do your best even when it's worse.
Do you have any questions or
No, I
concerns for
guess
me before we
the
get
way I
rolling?
would think that maybe you would pose a question so that, and then it may be something that if you ask a question, that would trigger me to respond on or not. If I feel that there's something that's perking up, I'll respond, that sort of thing. But
Absolutely.
I feel like this is like a little bit of an interview. So you're asking me a few things, get things going. And then,
Conversation
yeah, more
than
conversation.
interview.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
kind of the fun part of what I get to do is I just kind of gently lay out these questions to people
Sure.
and I see what you respond to.
Yeah.
And whatever, and that's really
And what
the
comes up.
nature of
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. 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 And then contacts, put it in some sort of context. Yes,
Right.
with that.
Right. And you could say that that's kind of what we do in martial arts too.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is. I'm a big proponent about on the floor and off the floor,
Mm.
bringing transitional values from what we've been practicing for, almost half a century now, to, working every day with people, meeting people, whether it's family, strangers, friends.
Those are terms that you use often, I can tell. On the floor, off the floor. That's not something you just made up.
Oh no, yeah, that's a term, yeah. Because I thought that after if we're practicing, more than almost two-thirds of our life, sort of thing, uh, how do we? It's not just about punching and kicking and being destructive. Having that confidence to how can I do that with my family, with my friends, and especially at work, in the neighborhood, when I'm driving, self-control, those types of things. That's when I think it really matters. And not that we will not make mistakes and be, contrary to our values and principles, but we're human. But at least if I'm mindful, I can adjust to that. Say, well, maybe I can be a better, better person. Not for the sake of being better, but to connect. I'm really big about seeing people, for me, as humans.
Sure.
And I find that if I'm upset about what you did or I did, it's easy to dehumanize. And then I realize that when I'm dehumanizing you or anybody else, it's something inside of me that's dehumanizing me. And I don't want to be dehumanized. So whether it's mistakes or
It's such an easy response, isn't it? That someone takes some action that is contrary to our value system,
yeah,
and we dismiss it. It is less than. They are dehumanized. Where one of the things I've had a number of conversations where I've offered this up to people, and they don't like this. If you were born to the same parents, you would probably have the same beliefs because that would be your genetics as well as your upbringing and set up almost all of the things that you're going to experience in life. And they're doing the best they can too with what they were given, just as the rest of us are.
I believe a little short story that I lost my mother when I was very young, ended up in a somewhat of a foster home at 7.5 until, pretty much after that, after high school, sort of on my own.
Wow.
And one of the things that the matron that impacted my life from the age of 8 to about 16, and then, pretty much on my own after 17, 18, she talked about basic principles like don't let people define who you are. I may be habitual and do something that you could definitely call me accountable. And maybe I'm trying my best and I can't overcome that right now. But that's not where I'm going to land if I continue to try to improve. So I think the essence of what she was talking about is that we as humans are holistic, but not just what we are, what we think, what relationship we have with our families and our friends, all those things. The connections with family is not just your mother and father and your sister, but your aunts and uncles. And one of the things that she tried to put together for us who were displaced, called displaced children, was that we all are brothers and sisters. of course, there was a lot of frustration, anger within me during that time because my mother had died and there was no clarification. In other words, my siblings didn't have ways emotionally to explain what death was, for instance, things like that. And so there was a lot of turmoil inside of me during that period. However, after being in this environment for 8, 9 years, I realized that you can assimilate with your brothers and sisters, people who you live with. And there was quite a few people. During the week, a regular time, there was almost 30 kids that were associated. Then on the summertime, summer break, there was also a place where childcare would happen. So people would drop their children off, for the daycare. And all of a sudden, it can bloom from 30 to 50 to 60. A couple of things came for me is that each of the people, each of the persons, not just the staff and the matron and the cook and everybody else, but each of the children had a different personality. That became obvious. So some of us would like to skip, some of us would do this, some of us do that. And it was more about personalities. So I got an inkling about personalities, and then and people can change their mind. That's, we've got a team. Yeah, I want to be on a team. Let's do this. And then they don't show up. And I say, why? And, whatever, And so the word organic came up after that we are organic people, and we have the right to say yes and no, and even after we commit, to change our minds. I'm not saying that's always, right way to go or is convenient, but people have the right to decide for themselves what they want to do. And how do you work with that? And the karate, in a way, on the discipline, the values, camaraderie, respect, decency, um, gratitude. After reaching this rank and even through my work life and meeting people, I realized how privileged I was, even as a Black man in America, that I've had more opportunities than a lot of people. And not that I was looking for any favors, but maybe because I was always pretty positive, so people tap into that and so forth. But one of the touchstones has been the martial arts, having that martial arts training and karate training, and having the wonderful teachers that I've experienced in my lifetime. I'm at a point now where I'm retired, and all I think about is giving back in everything I do, whether it's here with karate or different social groups or church groups or volunteer groups. It's all about giving.
People talk about giving in different ways, and sometimes I hear people talk about it as a duty. That sometimes I hear, and I don't know that I've heard people use the word in this way, but I'm going to say blessing, right? And there's a bit of a dichotomy there. What is giving back for you?
Yeah, it actually is a sense of freedom. I think it's wrapped in gratitude. It's wrapped in giving and receiving. And even when you give and someone says no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't always, these things sort of grown into it, but initially those used to be sort of hard stops and being disappointed. So giving is I think it's connecting to the point that we started with, is humanity. So I'm huge about people are going to be different.
Yep.
People are going to perceive things differently. They're going to eat people people you love, and they have the right to change their minds all the time. I've been married for 53 years, and every day I wake up, I don't have an idea what my wife is going to ask for because she can change her mind, and she has the right to change her mind. And and people say, well, and I realize that flexibility, compassion, and understanding. Huge thing, though, is acceptance. I think it's important to accept that you're sitting here, accept if we're videotaping, accept that. So standing over there, sitting over there, and then that becomes reality versus allowing my images in my mind and wishing things to be different than what they are. So even when things are crappy, it's okay. It's real. It's uncomfortable. It's annoying. It's frustrating, but it's real. It's living. It's living.
It's where the growth comes from.
That's right. And sometimes I think I'm finding out sometimes in the disappointments, there's a rose-colored thing. There's something to learn.
Mm.
And there's some things you can, one, avoid learning, sometimes in the hard ways or easy way, but it's all about, um, Travis, about a lifespan of learning, doing, receiving, understanding, connecting. But I think the biggest thing is where I'm connecting and with through humanity eyes and ears, and it feels comfortable. So when I give now, it's unbelievable that what I feel inside. I feel a sense of peace
Mm.
and appreciation, you know, and that's more than enough. It's not about tangible. It's a watch. It's not about the money. It's after all these years of training, coming to my sensei's dojo and working with underranked students or other students. I want to give. Be honest with you. When I was a younger kid, um, I thought about using up all parts of my body before I pass. Right, and this is a little bit same type of thing. If we're lucky, we can give everything back, if not more, than we received during our lifetime.
Sure.
And that in itself is a huge blessing. It doesn't matter. In the end, when we die, whatever we have is left behind.
Mhm.
Anyway. So when you have some input on that, maybe you want to do that. You want to maybe share the wealth, share the understanding if you can, by choice, not pushing on people, not lecturing them, not affronting them. It's trying to work with them and adjusting to. It's like a barometer, adjusting to the level of the person. So they're receiving something out of it each time. It could be here, it could be here, it could be there, and that's the beauty of life. It's being flexible, not just like on the floor, somebody's punching at you and blocking, but switching up with people. Some people feel high, some people resonate that this is the way, or some people say, I have an experience, and after that experience, I'm going to be this way, or I believe in Christ, or whatever that is. The beauty of it is that if you don't have to change your precision. You could just reflect on that person and have a little peek into their life that you normally wouldn't if you were just shut down the gates,
Mm.
you know?
So if we go back and talking about the unfortunate passing of your mother early and you stepping into this environment, which sounds like kind of gave you an accelerated education in
Yeah.
how other people were because just the sheer number of people you were.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing was that in my family, we grew up in the 50s. I grew up in the 50s as a preteen sort of thing. And at 12, 13, 60, what was that be, 58, so 61, right, turning 13. I saw I had to be very observant because the family members didn't tell you anything. Even at my mother's death, I remember at 7.5 years going to the funeral. She actually left to go to have a baby. She actually they thought she was having twins, so she had triplets.
Mm.
And she died out on the third one because it wasn't expected.
Mm.
And this was in the 50s, 56. So anyway, she didn't come home. Next thing I know, I get a suit and tie. I'm at this funeral. I'm watching her in a coffin. But nobody's explained to me what death is. Lying there, I go home thinking that she's going to come home. I'm waiting at the door. No one explained that what that she's not going to come. And similar thing, not that's drastic, but other members of the family didn't like. We had different, Mr. Burrows, which was my mother's husband, the original first husband. We all were, the first generation. Remember, the first four kids. My mother had 10 kids.
Wow.
Were through Mr. Burrows, but the rest of us had different fathers, and nobody knew who that was. And I didn't really meet Mr. Burrows because my siblings, came early. I had siblings that were 21, 19 years when I came along. They were much older. They were actually adults
I see.
when I came along. In fact, I was playing with my nieces and nephews who were 1 year older than me and then also some were 2 or 3 years younger.
Yeah.
And I actually, in kindergarten, first grade, I thought when I met you and said, who's your friends? And I would name my nieces and nephews. I thought everybody would have the nieces and nephews as their friends. I don't know. That was and then I remember, and then it was an incident where all of them jumped on top of me and hold me down and say uncle. Remember the two, and they made me say uncle to get up. In other words,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
said uncle was this old guy. And I remember that as this 6, 7, 8 year old kid. So I can't be an uncle. Uncle is a 30-year-old. I'm 28. So it was out of contact and no discussion about that.
Mm.
So I was curious about, and it wasn't good or bad thing necessarily. It was the culture that they were in and what they were exposed to. You know.
It sounds like it was a very clean slate. That there was a lot of unspoken,
Yeah.
undiscussed, which can steer good or bad. And so I think now I have to pose the question of where in this timeline does martial arts start for you?
Yeah, when I came here in America from Bermuda. I was born in
Okay.
Bermuda. Al Wharton was my first sensei. In fact, I started when Al wasn't even a black belt. He and
Mm,
I, as friends, we went to school together in Bermuda Tech. We were school buddies. We traveled to America together, traveled to Canada together. So we known each other from the time we were like 11 to 12 years
mm,
old. So, you're long before,
yeah.
we met pretty much in high school. And he started with George Mattson back in 69, 70. And then on Saturdays, Al and I, Muhammad Ali was like, boxing was part of the thing. So I knew about boxing. Even the training at the home on Saturdays would be Boxing Day. Okay. And
Mm,
many of the kids, so we knew a little bit about boxing. And then what would happen Al started learning karate.
mm.
And so I'm trying to kick at him. Pardon me, I'm trying to punch at him, and he starts using his feet, and it's throwing me off. I was saying, well, so I said, I went down and looked at George's school, wondered where he's doing. Jimmy was his direct sensei. And I said, man, could you teach me some of that? And the thing was that you're not supposed to teach until you were a black
Mm.
belt. But because we were friends, he said, okay, secretly because of you. And then he opened up his own school when he became a black belt. And I was the first student. But we already started doing some of that stuff under wraps. And then in 19, when
Yeah.
he became a black belt, I was the first student anyway. But we were doing it even when he was like a green belt and brown belt. You know what I mean? So,
You're not the first there. So what I'm hearing is in your 20s. So you've got
oh
all
yeah,
all
yeah,
this all this time of all this youthful development, all of this opportunity to get steered in 1,001
yeah.
wrong ways, but you didn't.
Yeah, yeah, a couple of that's where the doors open up. I
Yeah.
was immigrating to Canada.
Okay.
I was coming to America for vacation, and then I was going to go on to Canada. Because actually back in 67, Al and I and a few other friends went to Canada when they had the World's Fair, I think in 66, and they had Men in His World after that. Remember, they kept the pavilions going because it takes like 5, 6 years to
Yeah.
build these things
Right.
for 1 year. So they said, anyway, I went up there. I was mesmerized by Canadians. And in America, things were really bad because you had Martin Luther King die in 68 and Kennedy and the riots and everything else. And actually, I came over to Syracuse for training because I was
Mm.
a junior mechanic with Carrier air conditioning.
Mhm.
And I remember coming over, and sometimes I couldn't come because of riots coming out, stuff like that. So America was a dark place, especially for most people, especially for blacks.
Mm.
So when I came here on the plane ride, the president of the Unity Bank in Roxbury was sitting next to me like you're sitting next to me on the plane, asking about what I'm going to do. I said, I'm heading to Canada because, things like that. So he said to me, even though things were really bad, almost similar to what it is now with the right race war, he says, there were a young boy like yourself, young man like yourself, I was the least skilled, meaning junior mechanic,
Mm.
refrigeration, air conditioning. He said, you can come to America, you can go to school, you can work your way through it, be an opportunity. Even though things are really bad right now, there's going to be opportunities. So he says, once you go to Canada, tell them you're going to take an Ohio, just give it a year. Come back to the States, I'll hook you up for a job. And then, yeah, and that happened.
Mm.
And it's by chance that guy changed my life.
That's
Isn't that something?
I've had some interesting conversations on
Yeah,
airplanes. I've I've met people I kept in touch
yeah,
with briefly.
yeah,
I don't think I've sat next to anyone who changed my life
Yeah, yeah.
in that way. When you reflect back on that, does it seem, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll just kind of gesture you. Just
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of, does it feel like it was?
Intervention. Yeah, yeah. It was intervention. But I'm always been a friendly guy.
Mm.
You know, I'm also a little bit of a talker because when I was
That works
growing,
out well for this, by the
yeah,
way.
well,
Thank you.
when I was growing up, kids were seen, remember I said, not heard. So we couldn't have conversation in
Sure,
front of adults.
sure.
And when we were in front of adults, I remember we had to sit properly, you had to speak properly. I remember, for the home, for instance, I was a student. So they'd interview the parents who want to bring their children to the home. And I'd be sitting there and they would ask questions and they would have a couple of kids, a boy and a girl, a couple of boys and girls to show that, everything is okay, right? And my legs would stop moving. They said, "What's wrong with you, boy?" But involuntarily, my energy is what kids not used to sitting like we're sitting here, right? So it was all this body control, self control, not to do. And I used to put my hand up and said, "I'm not clear." You said, "Don't do this, but do that," and whatever. And I was just to get clarity. And back then, they tell you once or twice. Third time, they're going to hit you. So it was a lot of brutality, and I realized that it was just a culture thing. The kids not to ask questions, and I was very inquisitive. I'm always still inquisitive, so I'm going to ask questions. So anyway, because I came up in the regiment where you can't speak unless you're spoken to,
Mm.
was for my personality was very challenging. So,
But there's a lot of similarities in what you're talking about there versus, at least the way I was raised in traditional martial arts, right? It was a lot of, I might ask a question. I started pretty young. Just keep going. You'll
right, you'll get it.
your
Yeah,
your
yeah,
your your question is premature.
yeah,
You're not going to understand it without the repetitions,
yeah,
as well as the
yeah.
just sit there, just do what you're told.
Well, the huge blessing in my life is Buzz Durkin.
Mm.
So I'm always been energetic. I have always had a very vivid imagination. Worked well sometimes, for and against me. Okay. But I remember Buzz in the early days and even later on would suggest showing a technique, for instance.
Sure.
And he would say, I was living in behavioral. He says, when you go home, give a little homework. Why don't you work on that? So I built a little mecha wire and a little stuff that I had in my backyard. And people thought I was crazy. I was out there, you look like a post in a tree and stuff like that. This crazy guy is hitting the tree and, your Makawari strikes and all that stuff here. But I played with these ideas, these concepts. And then when I got back to the dojo, it's like, bring out put you back in the box a little bit, so you can work with other people and stuff like that. But he allowed me to take that punch and maybe look at it and play with it and explore with it. And that felt good, that it could be this, it could be that, it could be yin yang and all that stuff. And it's okay to be regiment, to follow the formula. But as long as I could have an outlet that I could play around with it, that was like playing I call the sandbox, then it's fine. So I could be the soldier, I could be the watchman, I could stand guard, I can do all those things. But because I know that I can have playtime and play around with that, where I can be silly or experimental, that sort of thing.
I find both, for myself, for my students are really important because it's the regimented time that leads to the ideas that you go and play with.
Right.
If you're only ever in playtime,
Right.
what are you working on?
Right. Yeah.
And if you're only regimented,
Yeah.
it misses out. I mean, I've always heard instructors say this. Your martial arts, your karate is not going to be exactly like the person next to you. But if you're only ever doing the same drills the same way, the same time, striving for that uniformity, we're not celebrating the differences. We're treating them as errors.
Yeah, but I think it's organic too.
Sure.
I think that, as we, over the decades and where we're at, the ranking is important, but connections now are even more important. When I go up and shake your hand, I'm really wishing you the best. There was a competitive up through the ranks, you yawn down or go down or san down or knee down. it was, it was a little bit of competition,
Mm.
especially with aspiring kumites and all that stuff. So you're really thinking, you're being a little selfish, for your own improvement.
Sure.
But there's a tremendous amount of freedom that when you start to, and in fact, that's the other thing he did. So I was doing, he said, if you really think you're good, this is one of the things he said to me. He gave me the all ranks class, brown,
Mhm.
green, brown, and black belts. And the key was that you have to engage each of these ranks. So it was fun sometimes to have the black belt, Dan Kumite and sparring technique, a green belt who's just now finally learning Kachiwa or something like that, needs a little bit more attention. Can you move through the meridian,
Yeah.
right? And that was the best thing. And here's what the deal we mentioned. If you really think you're good, it's not what you can do, it's what you can show and what you can teach others. And that's drop. And then another thing happened after was classes were growing. People start venturing out on their own dojo. So I was like the ambassador. I said, senpai, have me bag, we'll travel. So I'll be going traveling to your dojo, supporting you. So that was another, I'll be there to support you and help you with your students as you get on the road. That was a huge blessing. And it's funny, but it sort of worked my way into my life with working. I was project manager, project engineer, district manager, and I find out by working together, uh, you accomplish a lot more. It's okay sometimes when you have to perform, when you perform on your own, you got to be excellent. But I found that it was more of a gravity pull together when I was working with others and showing others and all that. So coming up through this thing at where I'm at right now was a combination of getting to that point of sharing. And that's what the matron was talking about. These are your brothers and sisters. They're not biological, but they are. You could care for them too,
Mm.
And it turned out to be a blessing because when I meet different people, I was for 8, 9 years working in an environment, living with 30 and 40 and 60 kids. You had to learn how to maneuver. For instance, they would have matrons and people guidance out on the grounds because it would be a big playground and stuff like that. And if some of the kids were misbehaving, what they used to do, they used to, like the lobster, they used to throw a net over the kids who are misbehaving. And if you happen to walk into that area, you'd be caught up in that net. And next you'd be standing and being chastised or drilled about something that you didn't even know the kids behind you were misbehaving.
Just in
So
proximity.
yeah, so that we're in the vicinity and then watching where you're going, looking around, be aware became really important, you know.
The 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 number of martial arts lessons that are coming out of this environment that you were raised in is blowing my mind. And so I guess my curiosity here is how much of that, the benefit of that environment, were you aware of at the time? And how much of it is now, years later, looking back?
Yeah, I think the seeds were planted when Buzz planted about the old ranks. It's not, no matter how good you are, how better can you make someone
Mm.
else? That really resonated. And I, remember I was survival of an early death. I
Sure.
had a lot to prove. I remember as a project manager of project engineers, contractors would say to me, Mr. Burrows, you're just starting to build a building yet. Your services is going to be putting in like heating and air conditioning or wiring, whatever, after we get the building framed. Okay. So once you go away and let us do what we have to do. When we came in, it'd be just things hanging in the air. I want to get it done, right? And so I was just a taskmaster. We come in, we're gonna focus, get all this stuff done, and I used to make people money that way. But then when I got into management, almost what Buzz said to me, the guy said to me, Mr. Burrows, if I catch you on the job, breaking out tools or working with having somebody do what they're supposed to do, you're paying them for it, you're going to be in trouble with me. Now that was a mentor. He's not saying I can't assist somebody or support someone, but he says you have to try to make that person invigorate them in a way that when they perform, they know they're going to be supported. And then as a black guy, most of the guys that were around, I was like one of the few black people.
Mm.
So I was being exposed to white guys or white women who did not have working experience and with Black people. So rather than get angry, then I adjusted and say, well, how can they believe that I have their best interests at hand? And this goes back to the class. How do I have to show them that I'm more, despite the color difference and culture difference, I'm still for you. You're part of the team. And then I went. I got a degree in business management, but I needed because I was moving up the ranks in businesses, and it's all about pedigree, so on. So I took this course in industrial Villanova, industrial management and project management. I knew all the stuff technically. I didn't have the terms and names and procedures and standards, and that's where I took these 2-year courses online to understand the principle behind management, industrial management, relationship, human relationship, about accounting and all this stuff here. And then the big thing came. I was a big stakeholder, so I was doing large jobs, $100 million jobs, $200 million jobs, and I would come into a room presentation, and the owner would be there, the developer, the architect, the financier, and everybody there. And, I would put my hand up and I say, well, it's all good, guys, but we need some latitude when the workers come. They're people who are going to do the services. We want to recognize them too, not just the people with the titles. So they look at me. I remember my manager called me, what the hell's wrong with you? Are you a commie or something like that? What's wrong with that? I said, no, I want to give recognition to the people who are actually doing the work. I know when all that stuff is done, when they cut the tape and all that stuff, all the bigwigs show up. And that's okay. But I want to give that recognition to the people who actually did the work. And so I built this camaraderie around called stakeholders. Everybody who worked on the project, whether they wanted, I remember some of the contractors didn't want anything to do with it, but they always be part of the stakeholders. And I'll be honest with you, 95% of my projects under the stakeholder process actually got adopted by the company. There was $5 or $10 million jobs and up, and they said yes. And what it was, when you were finishing your side of the work, I used to have appreciation day for you. I'm not buying you. I'm just going to have a luncheon or something, a outing, whatever, to appreciate your contributing. Believe me, we made money on you because we not only made money for this, but we made money on you when we mark up your bill and on and on and on. We make lots of money. So I said, why can't we do that? Because on the other side, developers take out potential customers. They could spend $30,000. They could fly people across the country, take them out for outings, weekend, an excursion, and all that stuff, and never get that job. I said, here we got people who we have are working with us and working for us, and we're making money on top of that, called gross profits, not just regular profit, gross profits. Why don't we show some appreciation? And the company changed the policy. They said, you know what? That's not a bad idea. Because what they did, they came to one of these treats that I had, and you couldn't believe how the contractors and architects, everybody was invited. They just the sense of it wasn't a lunch or the sense of being recognized and being appreciated. And the downside was that when we had a problem, guess what? Man, I had people who were swarm like bees that it wasn't their issue. Support would come from everywhere because they said that's it. And then when the vice president, executive vice saw that, they said, hey, it's not a bad idea. I said, all you got to do is treat people halfway decent. You don't have to bend over and all that. You just treat it, and it worked. And the same thing with the martial arts. This is all about it. Teach you with respect at your level and encourage you to keep working and find a way to encourage you to do your best. Do your best each time. And your best each time is not going to be your very best every time. Even in your worst time, do your best even when it's worse. And that way you sleep at night. I don't worry about, like Jesus said, the knock at the door, because most of the time I don't generate enemies. Now, if somebody's upset with me, they have an agenda, that's fine. But I know that when time I get up to, I go back, I'm building relationship with people, forcing anything, but I'm not worried about a knock at the door. I don't owe anybody anything. Okay. So when they come in and get a text guy to call me now on the phone and says, your back taxes. I said, you don't have to worry about it. My back taxes is already paid. I don't, I know what debts I owe.
Yeah. So you've brought a subject up a few times, and it's one that I'm curious about because a lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it happened before I was born. I was born in '79. You brought up being a black man
Yeah.
in this country, and it's a subject that I find interesting because, well, let's face it, it's never going to be my experience. And if we go way, way back, I don't know if you know who Victor Moore is.
Yeah. I remember.
So
It.
Victor
Yeah.
Moore
Yeah.
was on episode 20,
Yeah.
way back, and he talked about defending his title at tournaments where they made him go in the back door
Mhm.
to enter.
Mhm.
And so what I'm curious of is kind of generally this subject, but also because you existed in multiple countries. So
Right.
that gives you a
Right.
perspective that maybe not everyone's going to have. Through the 60s, through the 70s, were martial artists more open and accepting than the general population?
No,
No.
no, not at all.
Because I think we like to think we were.
No.
There's a bit of revisionism then that's happening. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that it was interesting that I was always a good sparrer fighter. Al Wharton's a world-renowned practitioner, so I'm learning from him. I'm learning from the best. And then way back when I became a showdown, I actually Buzz trained, and Buzz not necessarily, but he was one of the most wonderful trainers that you can get. Right? It's interesting how knowledgeable he was about fighting, even though you won't think that he's fighting. And we remember they had the in North America Rachel Root, right, for brown belts and black belt. Well, I won that championship in '76,
Mm.
and I was a target. The problem is that whenever you're a champion, anytime you arm robber, even the people in your dojo, man, people were just hacking you. I couldn't wait for that whole year to be over. You don't want to be a champion, man. But to excel at that level, and back then it was called control techniques.
Mm.
You had to take control, throw a punch. Hitting the body wasn't going to work. You sort of had to throw a punch to the head under control, and if not, you're going to just knock the person out. I mean, it shows that you really were what we call impactful fighting. So that was meaningful. But I realized that inside of me at the same time, I was having nightmares about my mother's death. Inside of me, I was fighting myself. In fact, I was tied to my mother's lifestyle. I thought that my mother relatively died relatively young. Maybe she was 1912 to 1956. What's that, 42, 44 years? So it's either 44 or 42. I could look it up again. It's relatively young. Yeah. And she'd given birth all the way up to that time, mid 40s. And I'm just saying in Bermuda, it was like a Jim Crow was over here for black people. Not everybody, but most of the black people, especially in my family, were relatively, humble and not didn't have a lot of means. Okay. So, go back to your question is that it's, I had to put my mother to death, that I had to reconcile her death from this guy that came into my life on the plane to my few ministers. I'm a Unitarian, to Buzz Durkin, to George Mattson, to Jim Maloney, to Al Wharton, people who helped me to quiet those flames and conquer them. So initially, karate was nobody's going to beat me up. But then I realized the essence of karate is to control ourselves, is to conquer ourselves, to conquer our fears, to enjoy our aspirations. It's all about that internal stuff. It's not about the outside stuff. Now, I'm sitting here as a 10-degree background, been through the journey, but I realized that's what it is. I knew about that maybe even 20 years ago. The fight is with us, not with you. It's how I handle myself dictates the outcome. And I don't know if everybody gets that, and maybe it's a blessing. But the doors that open, doors that can open, the guys I work with, as a black man here in this country, most of the tables sitting that I'm up until today, I sit in the board of trustees in the Berkshires called OLLI, OSHA Lifelong Institution. There's something about learning for life that it draws me. But I'm sitting on the board. I'm vice president of that thing. I just joined it because I wanted something to do after I retired. And all of a sudden, within 6 years, you know what I mean? I got really invested. So what I'm saying is that all this, the door opening, sitting at the table, fortunately for me, has been advocated by most of the white men. And my wife is a white woman. And so I have a half white brother that when my mother died, he and I went to home, and it was really hard for me to try to blame white or black when you're a part of my brotherhood or my family, biological family. It was going to be hard. And then my brother Richard was looking at me, I had sort of be like his surrogate father because he never even met his father. So there was a lot of pressure to not think about, the dark side and just using about racial divides because my family, I'm in an integrated family. How can I disparage? I'm not saying whether it's Jim Crow or Ku Klux Klan. I'm not saying extreme things, but how can I be against white folks if those people are part of my family? I mean, biological family too, married family. So I have to rethink about that. I have to have some openness. Where can I build bridges? About 7 years ago, I took this course called Nonviolence Communication. And I wanted to know how can I communicate nonviolently? And it's not passiveness. It's about skills, needs, and feelings and needs, which is marketing, right? So I've taken a lot, and I still do take a course here and there with that a little bit. Anyway, it teaches you that I can have empathy for myself. I call it building bridges. I can build a bridge over to you and listen to your story and have all the empathy for you, even though I may not agree with yourself, and hold you humbly and be respectful to you without losing myself. And that's building bridges. And that's the ambassadorship. And it's skill. But in the end, that's what it is. And that's how you can continue to make connections. As horrible as somebody may be, you want to still see them as human, not necessarily somebody you respect, not necessarily you want as a whatever, but you still see them as a human, as an essence. I mean, disagree with everything they're doing or saying or capitulating or whatever, but I still see them as a human being. And then I still feel whole when I see that. Even though it's awful. I've got those feelings. I see what's going on with the actions. I see the hurt and all the anguish that person or that system is doing to people. Despite that, I still see the humanity in that person, even though they may not see it in themselves. And that makes me feel hopeful. That's all. It's not going to necessarily change anything. Hopeful. And through that hope, maybe there is a possibility of us, at least respecting each other, or caring for each other as a society, as a neighbor, as a community, maybe as a friend, maybe as a neighbor, anything like that. Sure. That's all. It's just, hope that you will give a second guess or give me a reprieve if I made a mistake. I give you a reprieve. That's the hope that's there. And that's part of the journey. And it's a lot to do with the anchoring of the martial arts. I feel very comfortable with inside, not just the outside, the inside. And therefore giving, sharing feels good.
So I'm going to do something that's probably not happened before. I was looking for a decent segue. There isn't one. Normally, so I mean, you can see, the audience can't see. There's a box here. And because our time has a finite
Yeah, sure.
period. I have to talk about what's in this box because this episode is sponsored.
Okay.
And normally I do that at the beginning, but we just kind of
Went
took off and ran. And I've spent, as I've been listening to you,
Yeah.
and saying, is there a way I can segue this? And no,
okay.
because you've been talking about things that are absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
And anything that I was going to do was going to raid on somebody's parade. So I don't know if you're familiar with Kataro as a brand. They make belts. They make these great belts, and you can probably guess why this one is pink. We're going to air this in October,
Oh, wow.
and so October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and those folks out there who've been with us for a while know that we've been working with Kataro on some things, and it's great.
Oh, wow.
They all made in the USA, and
Yeah,
it's great stuff.
Yeah, it's great.
And so they're donating. This is going to drop in October of 2025. And for the month of October, they're donating 50% of their profits, right, on any of their breast cancer awareness items to breast cancer research. And this is the belt I'm going to be wearing this weekend, other than when Andrew and I are teaching.
Sure.
We've got another Kataro belt
that's
black on one side, white on the other. But make sure you check out Kataro, KATAARO.com. Use the code WK10 to save 10% on your first order. And if you're a school, make sure you sign up for their wholesale program. Yeah, they're great people to work with.
Yeah, and I love I love that, and there's quite a few students and friends are giving back. Freddie rides for the cancer charity organization. My wife and we give money to a number of charitable organizations who are helping people, locally and internationally. That's all part of it, and it's not about blowing the horn. It's about sharing and doing what you can.
I think there's a point that most of us reach as we take our martial arts journey, that we realize that giving back is almost necessary. That there's a point in your personal development, when we start looking beyond the punch and the kick, that if you want to receive as much benefit from your training as possible, you have to give back. And a lot of us, we give back in class. We give back opening a school. But I've gotten to know, I'm just as you have, a lot of martial artists who very quietly do a lot of giving.
Yeah, it's important. I think that we're connected to the whole human race.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that we start with a trinket, but it trickles all the way down. And then I think I have more empathy for people. I feel like we have a sense of abundance. So you want to give back. So people who are destitute, people who are striving, people in war zone, people who are just having their lives shambled and just destroyed.
Mm.
You have empathy for that because you realize that how lucky and fortunate we are to not do. I'm not saying it for extreme purposes. I'm just saying that if I want to touch the humanity, I have to look at those things and realize that that's part of our humanity too. And what can we do, that's meaningful? And sometimes it's limited, but if you're giving from the heart and the mind and the soul, that's okay, as long as you feel that you're giving, you're contributing. So right now, like for instance, I have the Sempai Burrows School of Karate. It's all about volunteering. It's not that I'm charging anybody tuition and mixing with different groups and all of that. And just recently, and it's proving out, men in general, from the age of 12 to 40, they feel left out. They're lost, and let's say the dark side, whatever. Of course, they get on the Instagram and all that stuff and get caught up. And what happens when they feel left out? Anger is easily to impose. So when you get angry and the other guy is angry, let's pick up a rifle, let's do this thing. It's all because they didn't have an opportunity, and nobody cared. And so we're going to make you care by the point of a gun or point of whatever, right? And it's sad, but it's true that to some extent, our political system is broken in the sense that it's not really necessarily designed to help. basic humans. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of, I'm not saying there's a lot of politicians doing a lot of good work and meaningful, but it's not really designed in a sense that is for the welfare of human or humanity.
Mm.
If they have that as a premise, then a lot of more things probably happen a little better. It won't be perfect. There's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be chaos and destruction, all that. But if
And there's certainly, without
yeah,
veering into politics,
yeah,
there
I'm
are
not going to
plenty
go
of
there.
data
Yeah,
points
yeah, yeah.
that we could pull that
That's
we're
right.
not going
Yeah,
to
yeah,
that objectively show
yeah. That's all.
there are some places that some improvement could occur.
That's right. That's all. And it first starts with here. It starts with a pajama
Oh,
handshake. Look in the eyes and look. It's pleased to meet you. Have a good day. Simple, right? And wishing you well for your day, for your week.
seeing someone as a human.
That's it. That's all. And the other thing is the phones are killing people because they've got the phone. Everybody looks in the eye and they put your hand out. I remember the people I put my hand out. Oh, it's not even you. That sort of thing.
If
And it's
you see the people, the thing that makes me the saddest, because you can tell, is the forward head.
yeah.
This
Right.
posture, because it tells if you're listening, if you're not watching, you can probably imagine what I'm doing. And I see someone like this, and I say, I know what you do when you're home. You're looking at your phone the whole time. It kills me.
Yeah.
Because what else is it likely saying about them? We can make some statistical assumptions around their physical health.
Yeah.
We can make some assumptions around their mental health.
Yeah, it's a tool. The phone is only a tool. It's important to remember that some of these attributes of television or monitors are tools. They're not necessary, and it's to make our life more pleasant and more efficient and helpful, but they're not people. They're just a tool, hopefully, to help us engage better with each other. And when it's not, then I want to correct. We used to have retired men's hiking group in the Berkshires. And it felt so pleasant sometimes when I get in my car and my car said to me, the phone's not connected. And it's so good. You go off for 4 or 5 hours with the guys and you go hiking in the woods and everything else, and nobody's calling you. And there's no answers and there's no immediacy. Even though when you get back, people are upset because, you didn't turn my phone. But we're so connected that way electronically, which is not really meaningful sometimes. Like it could have waited. I could call you tomorrow on this, or I'll call you 3 hours later. I could send you this email or whatever. And so we're being driven by technology in a way that's leaving a sensibility behind, leaving a humanity behind. I think you can use them both. It can come in to blend, to enhance. But if it's limiting me of connecting with you in a meaningful way, I don't know. Is it really worth that? So.
We've gone in a few different directions
Yeah,
today,
I know.
but they've all had
Scattered,
kind of a recurring
yeah, it's sort of
theme.
come around. Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you two questions on this body of
Sure.
knowledge you've offered up. The first one is for people out there, whether they are running their own school or maybe they are also a senpai, they're in some position of leadership. What would you want them to think about when they are working with students? Because it is it has probably never been more difficult as a martial artist to put the rest of the world aside and see people, because let's face it, a lot of us know the politics and the opinions of a lot of the people in our schools. What would you
Yeah,
encourage
I
them
think
to think about?
it's really important. The other piece is sacred space.
Mm.
So one of the things that Buzz does so well at times, even in a big class of 30 or 40 people, he may bring a student up, answering anybody, and he would watch them perform, the kata or technique or whatever it is, and his whole attention, that whole secret space, whole attention's on that person, every move, and then you would do your very best, and in that space between you and the instructor, you're at your best, not necessarily perform best, but you know that person cares and sees all what you're doing. Now, what we try to do is that we're not going to nickel and dime you on every little thing, but maybe do 2 or 3 things that you could take away and work on.
Mm.
So the hope of the instructors, the senseis, is that you have a chance to use these morals and values and mores and virtues that we teach on the floor, that you're sending these folks out back into the families, into life, that maybe on the short term is not really great, but on the long term. So after, like I'm sitting here after 50 years of karate, man, it was one of the most important things in my life that I didn't know. I remember when I was being stressed out, flying around the country, I'll get up in the morning, take a run, but I'll do a few katas, do a few breathing exercises. So it was to get me present so that when I went into the meeting or went to a visit or whatever, I could stay locked in on what's going on. So sometimes it doesn't show the work on the floor until later on. So having these kids, whether it's 5, 7-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, keep the faith because it's a long-term benefit they're looking at, not just short-term. I think the ranking is okay. I get 4 years, I get this and this here. But the benefit of that person, we're all ambassadors to the martial arts. The blessing about George, the fact that he was a kid in Vietnam and, coming back from Okinawa and sharing this thing, here it is 60, 70 years later, we wouldn't have been here if he didn't do that. So the new kids, the new students stand on our shoulders as we go forward. And if they can have some virtue, something that they can align with more than just a rank, more than just a title, that they feel that they can connect and give back themselves, that we all want to give back in some way, like you said earlier, then the value of a martial artist would be recognized and held up in regard, not disregard. And that's important. So when people meet me and they say, oh, you're 10 pounds, they go like this. I say, no, you don't. You're very safe. You'll be very safe. There's no intention of hurting you. That's the last thing I want to do, search. And
It's
that's
the wipe outs you got to watch out for.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's true. That's true. I remember doing this demonstration once.
People think I'm joking. No, that was the advice I was given. White belts will always show you.
Well, even black belts sometimes. I remember teaching the old range class at places, and I wanted the person to throw a kick. And the guy, he's a very strong kicker, right? But I wanted to kick. I was going to block the kick. So I said to him, have Bill kick. And before, look, the kick is on his way. He's so nervous. He didn't. I was when I tell him to kick, not when. And he hit me, and I somehow sort of had to just grasp myself because I didn't want to fall on the floor, right? So I said to him, "No, I wanted to kick when I asked you to kick, not before you kick." But the thing is that it's good. It's good that that we're human too. As instructors, that we're not going to get it all right all the time. It's like I go back to the word organic. It's going to take a little bit of the good and the bad and ugly and the pretty and it all mix it in a salad, and we find the things that we like in the salad. I guess what I mean, but it's all there. And it could be a good thing because if you talk to people and people who are outstanding, not by what they say, but what they do, that's what's important. I remember people I worked with, and they didn't like me personally. And they left the company. I worked for Siemens at that time. They became like the director of the hospital engineering department or whatever. So we would do service for them. I remember sitting down with them. And a guy would say to me, I thought you were a pain in the ass. Maybe you didn't like my approach or whatever. But you were always respectful. Even when we disagreed, you didn't make it, it was about the adjustment, about the television, it was about the computer. It wasn't about him. It was just a different way of looking at it. And I tell you how many people, the guy I worked with, the guy I worked under, he said, you're a pain in the ass, and he's giving me raises and giving me promotions. But he says, you're such a big asset to the company. And he benefited from production that I did. So even though he personally didn't like me, the value was that I helped him get raises, look good for his reports, and made money for the company that was more important than him liking me. Okay. So I'm just saying, that sometimes we misplace value.
Mm.
It's about value. So I value you as a person, as a human being, despite what you can do or what you can't do. That's really important. That's the journey. I think that if we do that through the martial arts, we're going to be okay.